Day 2 of the truce between Israel and Hamas. The much-awaited second round of hostage exchange has taken place. Hamas has released 13 Israelis and 4 Thai nationals in exchange for the freedom of another 39 Palestinian prisoners. This after it delayed the release of the second group due to discord over the terms of the deal and the delivery of aid to Gaza. Mediation efforts helped secure the release of the second group, with Qatar and Egypt hoping this truce can be extended beyond the current 4-day deal as well. Meanwhile, in Israel, there's uproar over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's handling of the hostage crisis. Calls for his ouster are growing. How will things unfold when this brief pause in fighting comes to an end? I'm Kaur Soroya, and to discuss this, we're being joined by Professor James A. Russel, Associate Professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at NPS, an expert on U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East, military innovation and national security strategy. Sir, welcome to WION.
Thank you.
Sir, how do you assess the current hostage for prisoner swap? We've, of course, seen some back and forth between the two sides already. Nonetheless, there has been progress. What's your take?
I think this is it's a sort of an indication of what Hamas has intended with these hostages, which was to give them political leverage. It has no hope of being able to combat Israel on the battlefield. So the hostages have served as a vehicle for them to elevate the issue politically to frankly, a global level. And so they're using this vehicle to good effect from their perspective, I think. They've achieved their objective, I think, in the taking of the hostages.
Now, speaking of objectives here, Israel has made it clear that this is not the end of the war and its hunt for Hamas will continue. We've seen the scale of death and devastation in Gaza. Do you think Israel can justify its operations on ground? Do you think this truce will help simmer down tensions?
I think the war is going to pick up where it left off when this hostage exchange deal finishes. And the level of destruction will continue and the casualties will continue. And it's going to be a bloodbath over the next week to 10 days, like the one we have just witnessed. And I don't really see any way around it. Israel's going to be moving into the southern part of the Gaza Strip and is going to be going after the Hamas leadership. This is, again, going to be close quarters urban combat. They're going to be using standoff weapons. A lot more civilians are going to be killed. And I think, yes, the temperature surrounding the death of innocent civilians is going to rise and is going to increase pressure on Israel to ameliorate or try to stop the conflict.
And mediation efforts, of course, as I mentioned earlier, have continued by Qatar and Egypt. The aim is to negotiate a broader truce. Do you think an extended truce or a ceasefire is in the offing?
I don't think so. I don't think Israel, particularly the Netanyahu government and the Likud side of the Israeli political spectrum, has any interest in stopping the conflict. They want to achieve what they see as a decisive military victory, which they see as instrumental to Israel's security, and they're not going to stop until they get this victory. I think it's a mistaken idea. I think it's an illusion. They can't solve this political problem through military means, but they're determined to push this all the way to the end. And I don't see that the international community, and I don't see that the United States is going to be able to dissuade them from this task.
All right, sir. Now, of course, Israel's goal is to annihilate Hamas. What would you say are the broader objectives and what needs to be actually done to restore peace in the region?
Well, I don't see how there can be peace in the Arab-Israeli dispute until the political aspirations of the Palestinians are dealt with politically, which is to say, until there's a political settlement of the Palestinian dispute, I don't think that the Netanyahu government and I don't think the Likud side of Israeli politics has any interest whatsoever in a political settlement with the Palestinians. They're interested in annexing territory on the West Bank. They're interested in adding settlements. They're interested in wiping out Hamas. And this is the sort of, this is their version of what security looks like, which is going to be more occupation. It's going to be separation barriers. It's going to mean checkpoints for the Palestinians. I don't think they have any intention at all of any kind of a negotiated settlement with the Palestinians. And without a solution to the political problem, there can be no peace. So I think the war goes on in one way, shape, or form, absent a political settlement.
All right. Well, meanwhile, calls for Prime Minister Netanyahu to resign are growing as well. There's uproar over his handling of the hostage crisis. How do you see things unfold on that front?
I think that this is a temporary setback for Netanyahu. I think that as in all states around the world, politics are dynamic, and of course the politics have been, greatly affected in Israel, as one might expect in a trauma like this, in the taking of hostages. But I think that the sort of the political sort of landscape in Israel has tilted in the Likud's direction. The coalition in Israel right now, which is the ruling coalition of the government, is comprised of many of these settler groups, fundamentalist religious parties, and this is sort of the coalition that I think we can expect to see in power for the foreseeable future. And if Netanyahu goes down, which I frankly think is unlikely, I think he would be replaced by someone that could even have more extremist positions than Netanyahu. So I don't see the political crisis as having some great sort of change of direction, or resulting in a change of direction in Israeli politics. I think the political landscape in Israel has been affected, of course, by the war. I don't expect Netanyahu to go down, and as I say, if he did go down, he'd be replaced by another right-wing extremist political figure, of which you can see the landscape in Israel. There are many of them today who would like Netanyahu's job and would basically keep the country on the same course.
All right. So essentially, if I'm understanding this clearly, you're saying that the international uproar and the involvement of the international community, as well as the uproar back at home, that in no way, shape or form will deter Israeli forces and their operations on ground.
I don't think so. I think Israel has shown itself to be impervious to these pressures. And as someone that observes, for example, the U.S.-Israeli relationship, I mean, the Israelis listen to us. That is to say, when I say the political leadership in the United States, President Biden has gone to Israel, of course, and is in constant communication with the Israelis. And the impression that one has, and I have to emphasize I have no knowledge of direct knowledge of any of these communications, is that Israel listens to our point of view, and then it goes and does what it thinks best for its own interests. And I don't think that includes listening to the American calls, for example, that call for restraint, which call for a plan on the day after the war ends, which calls for a role for the Palestinian Authority in what's going to be left of Gaza. I don't think the Israelis have any interest whatsoever in any of these views.
All right. Professor Russel, thank you so much for joining us on WION with all your insights on this.
Bye-bye.